All right. Hi, everyone. It's good to see you. And I'm super excited to share a really good friend's wisdom with you today, my friend Patricia Karpas. As way of background, Patricia, for many years, was an executive for Time Warner, NBC, AOL, and a company called Gaiam, which is a sort of a wellness company, I guess, for lack of a better way of explaining it, probably not doing it justice. But when she was sort of, as part of Gaiam, they were creating a meditation app. And right around that time, Gaiam was being sold to a private equity company. And Patricia and her business partner, Sig Kraus, were able to keep the app, essentially buying it from Gaiam, and went off on their own and created this amazing meditation app called Meditation Studio app. It's one that I'm sure a lot of you have heard me recommend. And it became like one of the top apps on the Apple App Store for many years. And also, I'm sure she's going to blush, but I think it was Forbes magazine had ranked her one of the top corporate mindfulness experts in the whole country. So she's very highly regarded. She also has a really popular podcast called the Untangle Podcast. And it's one of my favorites. It's like one of my top 3 favorites. And it's because she's an amazing interviewer. She's super curious and thoughtful in her questions. And so we're super lucky to have her here today. I met, just final, this is my final comment on this. I met Patricia back when I was doing the Do Nothing book, and I had read about her and reached out to her sort of blindly to ask her if I could interview her for the book. And she was kind enough to allow me to do so. And then I was able to do a little bit of a piece about her in the book. And then I just kept bugging her and staying in touch with her. And then sort of we became friends over the years. So thanks for doing this, Patricia. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, I would do anything for Rob, but I would do anything for that introduction. I have to listen to that introduction like every morning to cheer up.
There you go.
So generous with your comments.
Well, okay,
But
so
let's
talk about that for a second. Maybe in a different context, but sometimes getting up and being in the right state of mind these days is more challenging than it may be under normal circumstances. And so I'm curious what sort of thoughts are kind of going through your minds, and when you're talking to different people, what are some of the things that you're sharing with them about how to keep a good state of mind on a regular basis?
Yeah, well, I think it's challenging because everybody's situation is so different. And I think this whole pandemic, it really invites us to look at who we are as human beings, what's most meaningful to us, what we're most grateful for, and what are our, sort of habits and patterns. Because first of all, most of us, I think, as I said, everybody's situation is different, but I think many of us have slowed down quite a bit. For a multitude of different reasons, not driving into the office, not being in traffic. So I think it's really, I guess I would use that word, like invited us to accept things as they are, which is what our mindfulness practice teaches us, to be grateful for those really good things that we can recognize, to be curious about our habits and which ones we can change, and to really connect with the people that are most meaningful to us. And I see people doing this a lot. I mean, you guys are probably doing this too, having Zoom happy hours or, talking to people at different times of the day and week. But you really get in touch with who your inner tribe is, and maybe it's your family and your first tier loved ones, and then your second tier, maybe people that you've known for years but don't get to see that often. But having this ability to be in touch with more people is also a really great thing. I'm guessing that most of you are enjoying that. And Yeah, so those are just a few of the things. What Rick Hansen said last week, which kind of made me laugh, is he has to look at his irkability meter because he gets irked a lot more often now. And so it gives him this opportunity to pay attention to how irked he gets. And he used this really simple example, like his wife is a great cook. She makes carrot soup, but he wanted to make carrot soup one day and he thought he was doing a great job, but she was kind of standing there and just looking at him and he was just like, I'm so irked. And it just made me laugh because I see myself getting irked a lot. And I had been calling it like privileged annoyances because I do feel very grateful and lucky. I'm in Colorado, I walk a lot. My life is relatively good, knock on wood. And, I think it's just funny to pay attention to these things that irk us. And he used this other term, which was like how we need to learn to disengage from friction. And we both acknowledge that was a lifetime practice to be able to do that. But yeah, so I think there are a lot of these practices that can be so helpful right now. And the real challenge is remembering to do them. I think for a lot of people, you know what to do and what you can do, but we're not in that habit of doing it all the time. Unlike Rob, like your practice, tell us your practice. If you meditate every day, you do a gratitude practice.
Yes, I do. I don't want to bore the team with it for too long, but but it's so classic, by the way. Patricia always turns the tables. Yeah, so I meditate in the morning and the evening, and I love that idea of the irk meter. I love that because, it really does, the meditation practice does help me, I should say, become aware in certain moments and pause. And there's that moment between stimulus and response, and that's the moment you get to choose, what's next. And it can either be a good situation or not such a good situation. Like your carrot soup is making me crazy or whatever, or you just kind of breathe. So, I love that example that he gave. And I've noticed it's been useful during this time. There's no question about that. Just for those that don't know who Rick Hansen is, because he's a great resource and he has a lot of really wonderful books, could you share with everybody who he is? And you interviewed him recently on your podcast.
Yeah, he's the reason I like him is because he's this great, interesting, he's a psychologist and he's an author, but he's also a neuroscientist and a Buddhist. So he has this great way of integrating all of those disciplines and communicating them in a relatively accessible way. And he talks a lot about happiness and what it takes for us to be happier. And he values things like neuroplasticity, which is this ability to keep learning and growing no matter how old we are, which I think is an amazing opportunity because so many people, and even especially now, we see this in ourselves, we have these fixed attitudes or fixed habits about certain things. And we are on automatic pilot so much of the time. So a lot of his work provides these tools for us to be able to make these changes in our lives. Someone was just telling me something funny, so just a little sidebar to that. This one woman who was super conservative about not going out at all. And when she did go out, she would wear the hat and the mask and glasses and gloves and just really, really good at being compliant with all of the CDC rules and regulations. And she said she went to the grocery store and she did all of her shopping and she touched everything, but she had her gloves on. And then she went to the cash register and she went to take her credit card out and she pulled her gloves off with her teeth. And she said, and there was just like a minute and she and the cashier just started cracking up because like, what can you do? But
it's like the worst thing you could have done.
The worst possible thing you could have done. So, I mean, Rick Hansen's work, that's just funny, but Rick Hansen's work teaches us how to be really aware and curious about the things that we want to change, and he has these tools and techniques to be able to change that. So his new book, and I don't know why he named it this because I don't think it's quite as accessible, but his new book is called, I hope he doesn't hear that. I hope you don't put it anywhere where he hears that.
Don't worry, he won't be listening.
It's called Neurodharma, Ancient Wisdom. Well, I forget the full name of it, but the main name is Neurodharma. So I wonder if that would entice you guys.
Well, can you talk a bit about neuroplasticity and what that means, and like what's that all about?
Yeah. Well, there are many different areas of the brain, as I'm sure you guys know, and there are certain regions of our brain. For example, there are these regions of our brain that comprise what's called the default mode network. And so when we talk about habits and patterns, the default mode network is our habits and our patterns. And you see this a lot with addictive behaviors. We just become habituated to doing the same things over and over again. And so a lot of these practices teach us to intervene when you notice that you're getting hooked in your brain in this automatic behavior. You have this moment. I mean, to your point, it's that moment where you can actually pause and see that you're being hooked, and you can potentially change that. And the concept of neuroplasticity is this concept that it is possible to reprogram your brain. It's possible to change your brain. It's possible to learn, that we're not as fixed as many psychologists and neuroscientists may have thought years and years ago, but that there are practices and skills that you can attain that will help you to shift these things so that you're not stuck, or that you can continue to be a lifelong learner and almost like in some cases reprogram parts of yourself, I guess, if you wanted to call it that. But sometimes they can be very small shifts and just reacting to something in a different way. Rick uses this concept. He says that we have negativity to us is like Velcro. So our first reaction to many things is to be negative, or someone may do 10 nice things to you, but they do one thing that annoys you, and that's the thing that you just keep thinking about over and over again. And so he says, in order to really shift our brain, and this is part of neuroplasticity, you have to marinate on the good. So that if something lovely happens, your child brings you a daisy from the yard, or your partner cooks a special breakfast for you, that the important thing isn't just that they do it and you say thank you and you're grateful, but that you actually let that feeling soak into your brain, soak into your body, and that you, what he calls, marinate in that. So I just find that really fascinating, because it does mean you have to just stop and be with that moment. And if you can do that over and over again, then you're, I don't know if he would use this language, but you're really retraining yourself to focus more on the good. Right.
I was wondering recently if our brains were actually wired in a certain way leading up to this whole COVID crisis. And now we're going through this rewiring of our brain with this new situation. Because sometimes I notice, I think like many others, but I'll speak for myself, I get kind of bugged. Maybe that's the Urca meter or whatever, but just not so much maybe about the carrot soup, but just about the situation in general.
Right.
And I started to wonder, it's just my brain's not there yet. It's just not wired for this. So it feels so uncomfortable. What do you think about that? Is there something to that, do you think?
Well, I think we are always moving so fast. We're so busy all the time, and we're living under the illusion that we have some control and that there actually is certainty even when we're not in a pandemic. And what the pandemic is illustrating for us in such a big way, we don't, every day the biggest neon lights possible, you have no control and there is no certainty right now. But the truth is, there is never certainty. Like, you never know what's going to happen when you walk out of your house. I mean, you feel a little more comfortable, but I think our brains are wired to, in that automatic way, to think that we're going to wake up in the morning, you know, say goodbye to the kids, drive to work, come home, you know, everything's going to go as we plan. And it doesn't always happen. I mean, most of us that have lived longer in life kind of, you know, you learn that along the way. Something happens and you're like, oh, that's interesting. That wasn't supposed to happen. But Diana Winston, who's the head of the Mindful Awareness Research Center, and someone else that I interviewed, she brought that up to me. She said, I don't ever think we have certainty, but this is really showing us that in such a big way. So I do feel like it's, our brains are, of course, wired in a certain way, which is why we're such habitual creatures. And I do feel like this is inviting us to shift our thinking in some ways, if we're open to it. I think some people are more open to it than others. And then some people are just busier because they're home, they're still working a full-time job, they're maybe homeschooling their children at the same time. I mean, again, that's, I think, why everybody's situation is a little bit different. And some of us have more flexibility, freedom, and it's partial, it can be torture too, but to slow down and think about things. So.
Yeah, that's so true. My daughter keeps saying to me, we'll go on walks and she'll say, I just feel like this is a dream. And I wonder about like what's happening, because it does sometimes seem surreal, you know, even just walking down the street and you see somebody coming and you intentionally move over and you're spacing yourself out. And for a while there, it almost seemed like you were afraid to even say hello. Although I think I've noticed that to sort of loosen up, where people are actually like, you know, acknowledging people more normally now. But, you know, it just, what do you think about that dreamlike state that some people might be feeling?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are saying that it feels like it's surreal. And I think what you're saying is really interesting. Again, it sort of depends where you are, but just walking down the street and you see somebody and you pull your mask up, like, and some people like are very critical of other people. In Boulder, Colorado, where I live, you know, the people have talked about mask shaming. Like, if you're not wearing a mask, you're mask shaming. And, you know, you have on the one hand, again, this all reflects who we are as human beings, right? Like, you have the skeptics and the fanatics and everybody in between. And so people, I live in a condo, so I saw somebody without a mask in the elevator and I was like, oh, are you allowed to do that? Like, I'm just thinking I'm being judgy. Someone leaves a shopping cart at the top of the, you know, near the elevator, and I'm thinking, I don't want your germs. I'm not taking your cart down. Like, everybody's a little bit different. And I think that part's surreal too, because we're not used to seeing ourselves like that. In New York, now it's, you have to wear a mask, but before, my niece was telling me that she would walk her dog and there were a lot of people just walking around not wearing masks. And I think in that sense, a lot of people that do feel like this is surreal aren't able to like take it as seriously as other people. It's just you know.
Yeah, like it might just go back to normal in a week or a couple weeks or something.
Yeah, isn't it going to?
I sure hope so, but yeah. So let me pause here, and I just want to give the opportunity to the team, just kind of wave your hand if you have a question, and yeah, go for it. Emmy.
Thanks, Patricia. Staying on the COVID theme right now, and then I have other questions too. So how do we put into perspective the idea of not judging when we see others that aren't taking it as serious as ourselves, let's just say? Because in life in general, we know to be healthier, we have to suspend judgment of other people's opinions and behaviors. But when it's in a situation like this, what do you do with that? Do with that anger? Oh my gosh, look at all those people gathering on the corner. They're not supposed to. What do you do with that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think we're human, so it's impossible not to judge based on our own opinions. But I do think this goes back to, radical acceptance, just knowing that not everybody feels the same way that you do, and that there are so many different opinions about this virus that it's really hard. It's the same with politics. Like, it's always hard to get everybody to do or even believe the same thing. And I think that's reflected in this situation. I mean, we have people even in our condo that, the conservative, the looser person thinks the people that are really compliant are neurotic. And the neurotic people think that the person that's not wearing a mask in the elevator is irresponsible. And I think somewhere, and again, I don't do this. I judge the person that left the shopping cart outside the elevator, so I am not there. But I think there is this place where we have to let go that people are going to believe the same thing. And you see this with our governors, with our mayors. Everybody has a different opinion, and also we don't know who's right. So, I think it goes back to that's the most interesting thing about this. I have friends who have had COVID and their husbands haven't, or their daughter has, and they haven't gotten it. And it's just, I don't think we know really 100% what's right or wrong to do in this situation. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but everybody that I've talked to goes back to this idea of acceptance, like somehow, because otherwise we'll tear ourselves apart. We're the ones that are, we get poisoned by our own anger.
I like that term, radical acceptance.
Yeah, I wonder if you can meet them where they're at, so to speak. And it's always helpful if you can go through this exercise. I try to use this, at least, go through an exercise where I just wish them love and kindness and just wish them the best,
You're such a good person, Rob. I could not do that yet. Emmy, can you do that? He's such a good person.
That's very nice of you.
No, he is.
Hey, it's just my coping mechanism. Come on, jeez, let's face it. Let's see some other questions. Grace, and then Carol will get you next.
So, of course, being, aware and mindful, you do have to be informed. But for me, I find that it's definitely a balance. At the onset of the pandemic, I consumed too much media, and it turned out it was kind of dictating my attitude. So I had to find the right balance. But I do think that it's important to be informed, so that we can be mindful of the situation and aware. How do you manage that today? With being aware and receiving news, but keeping a pulse on it so it doesn't consume you?
Also a really awesome question, because I do feel like people have become news junkies around this. And again, like we were just talking about with Emmy, it's really hard because there's different theories, different philosophies, different doctors have different opinions. I mean, I do not listen to the news a lot, and maybe I sometimes live in my own little bubble, but I do listen to a lot of podcasts, and I consume my news in different ways. But for me, I try not to listen to all the different perspectives, and I'll find somebody that I trust, like Dr. Fauci. I'll try to listen to what he has to say, or I get Governor Cuomo's newsletter every day, because I feel like he has New York's governor, I feel like he has a really balanced and humanitarian approach to the situation. And so that makes me feel good. I feel like even though I'm not in New York, I feel like he's got this balance, like you're talking about how do we stay balanced. I feel like he's got this balanced perspective where he gives you the data, he gives you the statistics, he tells you what's going on, and then he has a deep breath moment every day where he shares something that's happened that is a real act of kindness. And so that's really how I try to do it. I cannot like listen to CNN over and over again. And it's overwhelming. And I think we also have to make our own choices, like we were also just talking about. How are you doing it now?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, same as you. I mean, I try to keep informed. I look for individuals that I think are reputable, and they bring a lot of data to the table, and they're backing up what they're saying. But I definitely have reduced the time that I spend consuming media news.
Yeah.
It's great. I didn't realize that Governor Cuomo had a newsletter thing that he sends out, and I can't remember what you called it, but the take a breath or something.
Deep breath moment.
Deep breath. Is that what he calls
that?
That?
He calls it a deep breath moment. Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
And also, I mean, I don't love this because, of course, they're a competitor, but he gave Headspace to free for everyone in New York. I don't know if you guys saw that, but which means he cares deeply about mental health. And I don't think you hear that necessarily from a lot of politicians. That's something that's been really interesting to me, because I think a lot of people are fragile, both with their mental health and their financial health. And so it's almost this whole, there's your physical health, your mental health, your financial health. And I think that's the other thing that we all have to balance for ourselves if we have choices.
Yep. Michigan did the same thing, by the way. We were probably following suit from New York, but somebody sent me a note that Headspace was available to the citizens.
Yeah.
Carol.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so right before the quarantine started, I ran out and got married to my fiance. It's been a month. It feels like we've been married for 3 years because we're stuck in quarantine together. And I'm finding that like we have little moments of bickering where you're just kind of stuck on a crappy feeling that isn't based on anything. And I think it's just simply because our worlds have been flipped upside down and we're stuck in our apartments. And I'm wondering if you have any suggestions on kind of just how to cope in this new kind of solitaire world that we're living in right now.
Oh, that's a good question. I bet Rob has better answers to that. I've done a lot of podcasts on relationships, but I live alone, and I see my boyfriend hiking and things like that, but I'm not living in a space with anyone. And so some people are like, oh, I feel so badly for you. You're all alone. And I'm like, I'm kind of happy all alone. But, it just depends on your perspective. I think there's good and bad to everything. But I can't imagine. Were you guys living together before you
Yes,
got married?
we were.
Okay. So
and I think it's just a general, it's not even necessarily like based on him, but I think everybody is going through these ebbs and these flows when you're, whether you're living with a huge family or you're by yourself or just with your partner, where like just everything has gotten you like stuck in like a gross feeling and
totally
get out of it.
Yeah, you're like upside down, and you've been turned completely upside down. And I often think about that because since I am on my own, I know that my feelings are my feelings. Like if I'm irked, it's usually not because somebody else has irked me. I'm not like in that relational irkness. And so I feel like it goes back to, some self-awareness, I'm going to ask Rob to give you advice on this too, but I do think with relationships, we all have to just accept that we're in this situation with these people we love, and things are going to go up and they're going to go down. And sometimes it's going to be because of you and sometimes it's going to be because of them. And sometimes you're not even going to know because you're both feeling highly irked. And I do feel like it goes back to like this radical acceptance that maybe you don't need to make any declarations or decisions on what you think of this person or how you're feeling in the big picture based on anything that's happening in this. This one person I interviewed last week was saying don't try to be productive during this time. She said, we're in a storm, and the idea is to get through the storm. And don't make any declarations. Don't try to write a book or learn a new language. Just get through the storm. And so maybe it requires like putting on your life vest and just riding the ups and downs of being together. But I'd like to hear from other people on the relationship thing. Rob? Or who's the
Grace.
expert? Oh, Grace.
Grace, yeah.
I'm just going to share that I found over the last week or two that, my husband was possibly irking me on occasion, and I unintentionally should not have been irked. He's absolutely amazing. I'm incredibly fortunate. I'm like, why am I being irked? And I didn't know. And so I dug a little deeper, and I realized since quarantine, I've had zero me time. Normally I have me time. I drive to work. I may go to the store by myself after work. And I realized, you know what? I need a little time just for me. And so we started incorporating, time for ourselves on the weekend that we can go off in our home or outside and do our individual thing for a half hour or whatever we need and support each other that way. And I found that helped my irk radar, and I'm not getting as irky with my husband. So I don't know if that helps at all, but.
That's so good.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
Good.
Rob, are you going to add something?
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I really, my niece who's 15, FaceTimed me the other day. And when she first popped up, she was sobbing. And I said, what's wrong? What happened? She's like, I'm so tired of this. I'm so tired. I want to see my friends, blah, blah, blah. And by the end of the conversation, she was like laughing and Snapchatting. And I just was so like, my heart ached for her, because I know for her, yes, she wants to see her friends. But I loved how she could go in and out of her feelings, feel horrible. And then in the course of 30 minutes, and it really wasn't anything that I did. I just love how like these waves of feelings just came and went. And I thought she's so lucky that it moves so fast through her like that. But Grace, I love what you were saying about self-care, because I think that's the other thing about being aware of your or just being aware of how you're feeling and somehow knowing what you need. This other person that interviewed me a couple of weeks ago said she has 6 kids, so I don't envy her. And then I'm like grateful, but she said she got in the bathtub and meditated for 4 hours. she said, don't worry, I put more hot water in. So, but she said she just needed so.
She was definitely a raisin after that, right? 4 hours. Jen, I saw your hand go up, and I especially want to call you out because Patricia is really a dog lover, and that is one
this
cute.
Is Daisy. Daisy's almost 10 weeks old.
Oh my gosh, I just connected with a breeder to get a puppy, but not till July. Let me see that.
She's a Cocker Spaniel.
Oh, she's so cute. Oh
yeah, she's keeping us entertained.
She's ridiculous.
Did you have a question, Jen? Yeah.
Sorry.
Question or comment. What I wanted to know is one thing that I've seen here, and I wanted to know from Patricia and from other people, is through all of this pandemic going on right now, I've seen the best in people come out. I've seen we all have a common goal. We all have to get through this, to stay healthy, to keep everyone safe, and it's bringing back humanity. It seems everyone is cautious of each other, is caring, is always asking, and I just wanted to know if other people were sensing that and soaking it in and trying to let it, kind of permeate through yourself so you're the same way.
Patricia, what do you think about that? I definitely want to hear what everybody else thinks too, because I am feeling, I feel like that's, in my world, it feels like it's gone in waves a little bit. I feel like sometimes there's been this like enormous amount of kindness, and then going back to, people getting easily irked or, shorter tension. Someone yelled at me for singing on the mountain the other day. And I was like, really? I mean, okay, I don't have a good voice. It's crystal clear, and maybe it was a little too loud or something, but I do feel like most people are being kinder, but then there are people that I think it goes both ways right now.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Anybody want to chime in on that? Go ahead, Carol.
Yeah, I think like when I see people on walks now and like I say hello from my distance, I feel people are like almost falling over themselves to say hello back and like smile at another person. Or like I had to go into the office to print something off and I saw Josh from a distance and it was almost like exhilarating to see a person and be able to like interact and kind of pour some love out onto a person. And then when I go into like grocery stores and you see people standing too close together, there's almost a moment of like, with all this love in the world, how are you standing so close to that person? Give them their space. So I think like I walk the line of it, like what you were saying, either being like so consumed by how like over the top people are being and being soaked in that, and then really being concerned of people's personal space and almost getting upset when people are in other people's personal space.
It's good. Thank you, Carol. Anybody else want to share anything on that? Any other question?
I just,
Emmy.
oh.
Rachel, we'll get you next.
No, let Rachel go.
Okay.
I
Rachel.
want you to continue your thought, Emmy, since I'm going to kind of go on a different tangent.
We're in polite zone.
I know,
It's
right?
so cool.
Well, I do actually have I have another question, but I kind of feel that right now, since we have so little time of interacting with other people, that it's kind of like two extremes, like depending on kind of how you're feeling right now. It's like either you're so excited to see people because that's kind of like the moment you're in,
Yeah.
or if like for whatever reason you're tense, you know, that's the reaction you're going to put out, is just like kind of negativity, because you don't have you usually have all these times during the day to kind of calibrate how you're feeling, how you're interacting with people. But it's like when I go to the grocery store once or twice a week, it's like that's like the only time I see people. So if I'm in like a bad mood, I'll be like, ugh, people are all around me. Or I'll be like, oh, this is so cool. Like, I'm gonna be nice to everybody. It's like, that's my moment to interact with people. And it just kind of comes out. Like, I think I'm being pretty nice most of the time, but I don't know.
I bet you are.
Anyway.
Go
we'll
ahead
see.
with your question as well. while we
Okay,
have
so
you.
my question is, I'm so excited that you're here, Patricia. I was supposed to be going on the retreat too, and still kind of in denial that it's not happening. I've never done anything like that before, so it was really going to be like my first dive into really like anything more than doing like headspace meditation and anything like that. And so since we're not doing it, I feel like whatever we would learn there would be like perfect for what we're going through right now. Like, are there any just like tools or practices that maybe we would have learned out there or taken, whether it's specifically the Do Nothing retreat or just kind of what you get out of a retreat in general, that maybe somebody who hasn't actually had that experience can learn or use or think about that would be useful for kind of the opposite of being out in the middle of the mountains and, you know, having that time to yourself?
Such a good question. I bet Rob has an answer to that too. I mean, I think it's great that you're using meditation apps, whether it's Headspace or Meditation Studio or Calm. And the thing that you learn at a meditation retreat, and the thing that you were going to learn on this meditation retreat was really a mindfulness-based stress reduction type of meditation, where you learn to focus on your breath. And what's helpful about that, it's almost like training your attention to always come back to your breath. So you may have different thoughts or feelings or sensations. You know, we talk about like debris in the river now. There's so many questions and so much, you know, maybe even anxiety associated with all of that. And this idea that we can practice over and over and over again, coming back to our breath, can be really comforting, and not just comforting, but can really have an impact on your neurology and your physiology as well. And I think there's that, and then there's when you're on a retreat like that, that's partially silent and partially discussion. It's a really nice combination because you're really learning how to be with yourself, which is so interesting because I think having been on a few different silent retreats, it's been really helpful because I am comfortable with being alone. And I think we kind of learn that even if we're with other people, that there is this important skill we need to have of being able to come back to ourselves and come back to our breath, and to be able to do nothing, because right now we don't have a choice. In a way, many of us are in retreats in our own homes, and some people call it retreat, some call it refuge, some call it prison, you know, it just sort of depends. But it's it is creating that container for you to be able to practice some of these tools that you learn in meditation. And what's kind of interesting is that Rob, doing these lunch and learns, like you could practice meditation during the week and then have a lunch and learn be a way to, talk about your experience with meditation. And I think that would be a really nice thing. Just saying. Just saying.
Love it.
What do you think of that, Rob? How would you answer that question?
Yeah, I think, especially when you have a little bit of time to just be in silence, things start arising. Usually, my experience has been usually the surface type stuff, and then that sort of fizzles away a little, and then there's some deeper stuff that comes about, and it's all very meaningful and important thing. These are all very meaningful, important things, and it could be quite powerful when you go through that experience, and you start to see, smell, feel, recognize things in a whole different way. It just becomes life becomes more vibrant when you take some time to, kind of settle in that way. And Josh knows a little bit about that too. Josh, do you have anything to add? He was at the retreat last year.
Yeah, no, I agree. And yeah, you just do a lot more noticing for sure. And then, I think that as long as you don't sort of let it all sort of stay back in Colorado, and make it sort of part of your practice, you're sort of, I think your sensitivity rises and your ability to notice improves. It kind of becomes muscle memory over time. So yeah, I excited for you guys for next year for sure.
That's cool. Thanks. Any other questions for Patricia? We have time for one or two.
Do you have a quick one?
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
If you don't mind, unless, I don't want to preempt you if you have one you're super excited about. I guess changing a little bit more, like kind of on the business aspect of things, I'd be curious for you, your work, your company, as well as the broader kind of health and wellness industry, meditation, nutrition, et cetera. I'm curious if these last several weeks of COVID and what will, however long this will last, if you and your contemporaries are talking about how that might change things in the space that you work, both whether it's yourself and your business or the broader kind of industry that we're talking about. Curious what the narrative is there.
Well, our business, Rob hadn't, I don't think he mentioned that our meditation app was acquired by a company called Muse, which is a brain sensing headband that teaches you how to meditate. So it's a technology. And so our company is based in Toronto, and a lot has changed, right? Because now this is a company that was, similar to yours in that, we had 50 to 60 employees all working together, except for some of us like me that were virtual, and having to learn what it takes to have a culturally and emotionally healthy company outside when you're working virtually from home. So what our company has done is they have all team Zoom meetings, I think like you do, every Tuesday morning, and someone leads a meditation. So there's a 10 to 15 minute meditation, and then everybody has a discussion. And that's really it. Right now, I think everybody is learning how to work virtually. Some people are better at it than others. what I'm seeing in the industry is that a lot of companies in the nutrition, yoga, everyone it's almost like telemedicine, right? Like there have been telemedicine initiatives and projects over the years, but it's never become a real thing because it's just never been adopted widely. And now you see the FDA lightening up on some rules around telehealth and telemedicine. And then you see a lot of people in the health and wellness industry looking at what are the possibilities for reinventing their businesses where they don't require face-to-face contact. I mean, I see that happening in the medical industry too, with physicians doing more Zoom visits. And so I feel like that this whole industry of health and wellness is going to go through a transformation because of this. I think people are always, a podcast I listened to was talking about this situation as creating the preconditions for trauma or PTSD, because we lack safety. There's a lot of social isolation and loneliness. There's all these things that uncertainty that are consistent with a diagnosis of PTSD. And so I do feel like this is calling out that mental health and physical health are such a big priority, and that there will be many, many new ways to deliver on that.
Yeah, that's good. It's interesting. All right, any last question before we move on? Okay, cool. Patricia, thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome. I love your company. I want to work there.
Maybe one day we'll recruit you. Maybe one day we'll recruit you.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I wish you
so
all so much health and happiness.
To learn more and join the conversation, please visit donothingbook.com. And if you haven't yet, leave us a rating and a review. Your feedback is what keeps this show going. Thank you.